Surprise. What's going on? You know what time it is. It's time for Riot Starter TV. It's been a minute. Since it's been a minute, I wanted to come back strong because that's what we do around here. I appreciate you all. It's Black August. This is the, we got 2 days left of Black August. It's today and tomorrow. It's the 30th. It's a very important day. It's a revolutionary day. Today we commemorate the first major rebellion here in the United States. Gabriel Prosser, a blacksmith, 24 years old, decided that enough was enough in Richmond, Virginia, and he got his crew together, and they decided that they were going to take over an armory and go to war with their captors. He said that he didn't want to live his life in shackles and chains, so he decided that he would do something about it. He didn't just protest, he decided to get busy. Unfortunately, like so often, we have Africans who are scared, who are afraid for their lives, so they'd rather, as this Public Enemy song would say, switch than fight the power. And they switched on him. And unfortunately, him and 25 of his comrades, including 2 of his brothers, were hanged in Richmond, Virginia. But today was the day that they planned to move and do what they had to do. I had the honor, I don't know if I want to call it the honor, but the opportunity a couple of days ago to visit the site where he was executed. And, it was a very spiritual situation. I have photos. If you want to check them out, you can go to my Twitter at Kalonji Changa, which is the name you see on the page right now. So, we pay homage to Gabriel Prosser, a brave revolutionary. Also, as life would have it, 74 years ago, happened to be the birth of one of my favorite freedom fighters, a brother who I got to know through his family, through his mother. May her soul rise in peace. His wife, Akua Jerry, and his son, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. I organized with them for years, for those who have followed my organizing efforts, but we're talking about Chairman Fred Hampton, incredible orator and organizer and freedom fighter, a brother who at age 14 years old had the feds on him. He got his first Fed file at 14 when he was organizing as a junior captain of the NAACP. He was the deputy minister of, deputy chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Through his leadership, that particular OG, that elder, he fed over 3,000 children in Chicago a week. They organized sickle cell clinics, all types of health situations. He was also the original founder of what we know as the Rainbow Coalition. And we know that the Rainbow Coalition was hijacked by Jesse Jackson. We know that Chairman Fred used to say, "I am a revolutionary," and Jesse Jackson switched it and flipped it to talk about "I am somebody." And he continued to you know, move in the wrong direction with that. But anyway, today we honor Gabriel Prosser and Chairman Fred. And I thought it would be fitting that on this day that I bring in a someone who I consider an abolitionist, um, someone who aids in our people's liberation from the other side of the barricades, which is the same side of the barricades. Let me just get that right, but with a different approach, and that being none other than a good friend, Dr. Joy James. How you doing, Dr. James?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Kalonji?
I'm alive on arrival. I'm trying to relax, trying not to burn nothing down, because it's
It's a good day then.
it's a beautiful day. It's the year of the dragon and the ant.
Mm.
For folks who are unfamiliar with you, um, we know you as an author, we know you as a professor, and we know you as a lover of our people. So, what is something that most of us don't know about Dr. Joy James?
Oh, you start with one of those little surprise getting to know you
How
things.
we do, we do around here.
Oh, wow. What do you don't know about me? Oh, you probably already figure out that I'm cranky sometimes. I'm impatient with my employment sector, but I love the land and I love the water like most of us do. And so the beauty of the environment, to the extent that we also fight for it, like, so we fight against genocide, we fight against ecocide, right? But I'm a tree hugger. I would, if I can sit by water, Oshun, Yemaya, if I can see trees, the struggle is the struggle, but we're also held by creation. And maybe that's known or not known about me, but that for me is a stabilizer.
Wow. It's funny you said that because I was just talking today on the Remix Morning Show. One of the things we were speaking on was the environment, right? And climate control. And I was
Mm.
telling folks that, to me, I wouldn't really understand a freedom fighter who wasn't concerned about the planet first. Because if, and of course, organizations, FTP, and usually they say everything but for the planet. Um, my take on it is if we don't have if the planet is in trouble, then we all in trouble. We don't have to worry
Mhm.
about fighting for political prisoners. We don't have to worry about escaping. We don't have to worry about liberation. Um, we just, we'll meet our demise at an early age. So definitely, we should appreciate that. We all should be hugging trees. You know what I'm saying? Some of us too busy smoking trees and we forget about hugging the trees. But
You
nevertheless,
can do both.
yeah, we can do both at the same time. You walk and chew gum. Anyway, definitely honored to have you on board today. You are a professor at Williams College, correct?
Correct.
And you are in what department are you in for clarity?
I'm a political philosopher by training, and I'm with the Humanities program.
No doubt, no doubt. So I want to ask because you know, being in the academy, I want to ask. I've read a lot of your work, and I've checked out a lot of your lectures and speeches and so on and so forth. I want to know what got you to this point. I mean, as far as in the direction of fighting on behalf of our people, of being an advocate or an activist, so to speak. What led you down that path?
Wow, that's interesting. I thought you were going to ask me what got me into the employment sector, which is easier to answer. I mean, my mom was like, "You can't hold a 9 to 5 because you don't listen, so you got to find a job where you don't have to show up on time and every day." So, the people, the community. I mean, it's like where I started off with the trees and the water, right? We're an extension of that. Like what we love about nature, we love about ourselves. And then when we see devastation, when we see poisoned water, or you see poisoned people, or people beaten, or trafficked, or caged, right? That becomes a catalyst for change. At least that was my experience. So in grad school, I'm not going to tell you where I went, whatever, but I ditched a lot of classes to do organizing. I still managed, to get out with a degree. So, you know, could eventually get a job in the sector. But it was two things. It was love for the people because that would allow me to love myself more. So if I personalized it, I would say, I grew up in a military family with somebody who's deceased now, who probably was an intelligence officer when the US was at the height of, decimating freedom struggles. So the issue of betrayal, right, is structured into family life, as well as, a lot of guns, a lot of violence. So the ability, this is going to sound weird, but maybe my capacity to look at violence in some ways and not have to look away, and actually to see more clearly a predatory state and how it devastates communities as well as all kinds of environments. Maybe that is like a gift horse from growing up on military bases. I mean, I've said in other sites, university sites, talks, whatever, it took me a while to realize that where I learned to play kickball at Fort Benning, Georgia, was the same place that activists would call the School of the Americas, is what the official term was, but they called it the School of the Assassins because, you're teaching death squads and, people who took people out. And so the how you reconcile that, at least for me, is to walk closer to the people and to learn from them. And so the suffering was always there, but having come from the sector of where somebody in the household is getting paid and we're getting health insurance and braces from being predatory, the ability to sit with people who are the state is trying to reduce to prey made me pay attention. And then I had to reconcile where I came from, which made me want to be more active and engaged. But the gift is that the more I organized, the more I learned. And so if my work looks a bit different from most academic work, if the way I talk or write is a bit different, it's not based on academic training or multiple degrees. It's based on the wisdom and the fierce love and commitment that I encountered with different folks, like in the US, but also trips to Africa or Europe or Nicaragua during the war, meeting with Salvadorans who'd been macheted by the Contras that our tax dollars were funding, going to, the island, meeting people who were exiled, who were protected, by the Cuban government. Everything has been a journey of learning. And so I hope to continue on these journeys, even as, I don't get out much anymore and I have family responsibilities. But how I got to be in this conversation with you right now is because I met people like you over decades.
Or that's I mean that's a amazing turn of events, and I want to know like how was that received for, like, I mean, how did family look at that? I mean,
Oh my
because
God.
yeah, I mean, because
Family
you
doesn't, I don't exist.
okay, so you
So
just
I'm not gonna tear up right now, but anyway, I mean, I existed to the extent that I was a caretaker for the elders. And so that's why I talk a lot about the captive maternal and being on a seesaw, on the fulcrum, on the plank of the seesaw, right? Like you're balancing both sides. Like on one side, you have the youth and the children that, you need to keep them alive, not just physically, but spiritually, intellectually, politically. And the other, you have the elders who, you know, we had class divisions in terms of my family and parents. So my mother grew up a sharecropper in um, Mississippi, while my father was having private clarinet lessons or something in San Antonio, right? But the elders transition with fear as well. I mean, children grow up with fear, and the elders are moving to transition with fear. And whereas the youth, not all, but and more should have a belief in the possibility of change and what we owe them and what we couldn't produce, but also what they owe themselves. The elders have regret, right? Because even when you struggle, it, as you know, it doesn't turn out with the victories that you hope or anticipated, and the sacrifices are still there. And I don't think that we regret the sacrifices. I think we regret that we weren't able to do as much as we could. So growing up in a family that was conflicted, that would inch towards civil rights, but didn't want to be radical, um, meant that a lot didn't get said, or people like masked over what was said. And then I became that one kid who was like, let's talk about it. You know, like, I want you to shut up.
Go to your room.
Be quiet. Yeah, go to your room. And for me, I said this in a podcast with Rod, Political Theology Network. I just, I was in Texas at the time. That was the last stop. No, so I was born in Frankfurt. We moved every 18 months. Last stop was Texas. Um, I would just go into tree houses and I would take books with me. And I was reading my father's books, you know. So E. Franklin Frazier's The Black Bourgeoisie, that's the, my first loathing, you know, the black middle class, like at 11. And then I'm reading Shakespeare. It's just like I was a weird kid and I stuttered. So my friends obviously were trees. Those were the only people or things I was hugging at the
He's a
time.
literal tree hugger.
Literally, it was true. There was nobody else. It was
Right.
trees and it was books and it was politics and it was, you know, I'm going to come out a bit weird and that's going to be okay, because at some point, I probably didn't know this or articulate it to myself consciously. I'm going to meet people who feel and think in similar ways. And then I'll have community. I won't have home, but I'll have community, and community will be adequate, more than adequate.
Wow. I mean that's it's funny because most people that I run across, including myself, you know, coming up, you don't necessarily fit in. You know what I'm saying? And for myself, I grew up. My father didn't have private clarinet lessons. Um, he was a little more angrier, but coming up, you know, I was always trying to fit into situations, and I couldn't. You know, I was cool because I was funny and everything. You know, so you know I can crack a joke on somebody and get them up off me. But I was a short kid, and you know, playing football, had a chip on my shoulder the size of Brooklyn. But I grew up in inner city, and I couldn't really. I just felt like I could never fit into any situation. But then it dawned on me one day that sometimes you have to create your own lane and cruise control in it. You know, sometimes you're not meant to fit in. You're meant to build. You're meant to guide. You're meant to come up with new paths and new roads. So I unite with that part. You know, you mentioned captive maternal, and you know, for folks who are new to you and to your teachings, which hopefully there are a lot of people in this checking us out that are, because I always like to bring on, I like to broaden their horizons, for lack of better words. I don't like preaching to the choir, even though sometimes the choir don't necessarily know the scriptures. What is captive maternalism, and give us a small breakdown if you could.
Sure. So, you know, for decades, I was a activist and a Black feminist, and in some ways, I still am a Black feminist, but it wasn't, the ideology was becoming more bourgeois, it was becoming more academic. It didn't see where poor people fed in. And also, it seemed to be competitive. You know, like the need was to have your first Black woman, everything, like the need was the first Black man, anything and everything. And of course, there are people who don't identify with either genders. And it sort of dawned on me when I was watching parents, you know, hustle in Harlem to get the right schools or the right supports for their kids, particularly if their kids were neuroatypical. this kind of labor was beyond the maternal, beyond the paternal. And also you have households where the older kids are raising the younger kids, right? So there's no real age limit for this caretaking. There's no specific gender, even though the labor looks feminized. And but then, you have to make a pause for Malcolm, because he said there's house and field,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so, like, whether you're in the house or the field, I mean, the gender isn't what's key. It's what kind of labor and what kind of loyalty, right? So, with the captive maternal, I started seeing the first stage of conflicted caretaker. Like, you got your full day job and you got the kids you need to protect. Um, and sometimes people are celebratory. And I've written and talked about this. Yeah, I got my kid into an elite school. And my position is like, well, they're going to be harmed there psychologically, emotionally, right? If they're Black.
Sure.
But I could see, like, you don't want to put them in the school that the city won't, like, give adequate resources to. But either way, your kids are going to be harmed. So you're conflicted because the schools, I could pick a better word, but whatever. The schools suck. They're not child friendly. They're not really intellectual. They're creating workers, laborers, or like, future incarcerated people. They're reproducing the machine of the state. And there's not a real soul. And children have souls, or their souls or their spirits are more evident than by the time you get to 30, 40, 50 and you're jaded. So you could be celebratory that you got that scholarship and you're going to hang out with rich white racist kids like for the next 8 years or something, or feeling despondent, we're going to have to put you in this local school where there's like mold and leaks, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, the caretaking stage of just domestic labor, you can move to the protest. We're going to like protest this school or protest the police. We've been through the protest movements era, whatever. And in that protest setting, that is a form of politics, but it is not a form of rebellion. But when you move from there, when you see that the protest, you have a petition or you change some laws, but fundamentally, wealth still remains in one sector and they still have the police to brutalize you in another sector, that the protest cannot deliver the liberation that you desire for you, your family, and your community. And that's where I see like Maranaj, right? Then you're like, we build our own encampments, we build our own communities, we build our own schools. It You reach this state though, and I'm gonna concise and try to wrap it down, but you could find this work. Just Google captive maternal, you'll see it if you're interested. You reach a state where this position of autonomy where the state comes for you. Because Maroons are always hunted. I mean, the brothers were going to take over, and sisters probably too. The armory they were going to deliver, they're betrayed, they're hunted, and then they're decimated or disappeared. And what I've talked about is because I didn't want people to think this is only female or motherly labor. I've talked about Attica before on these stages of the captive maternal. That one, you're incarcerated and you reproduce the prison because you're the trustees, you're doing the food, you're delivering the medicine, you're comforting the sick and the ill, you're singing to each other. And yes, there's predatory violence in prison, but there's a lot of caretaking. And the prison structure could not, just like the enslavement era, it could not have survived without us caring for each other, stabilizing each other, and therefore, ironically, prolonging, right, the stability or shoring up the stability of the predatory state or slave master. Like, we were forced to caretake everybody. White babies on the breast, like massive sick, you gotta feel like that was structured into enslavement.
Right.
There's the monetary part of like we're making you money, through cotton stuff. And there's the emotional network of just stitching things together, including our own communities. Then in Attica, when George is killed, right? There's a response. He's killed, what, August 21,
Yes.
on the other side of the continent.
That's right.
And then people who never met him but read him and again had a kinship through words. And I've said, and probably felt that George loved them because he risked everything for freedom struggles, right? You have a rebellion and a resistance. And what do they do with Attica? They create a maroon camp inside the prison walls.
That's right.
There's like, who's going to do the media? Who's going to do security, keep people in check? How do we do food delivery? How do we dig, waste passages, like to have some sanitation and health stability? And the only thing they're asking for really, they're not asking to get out of prison. They're asking to be treated as quote men, and some didn't identify as such, but they were asking for human rights and civil rights. And what is the state response? The same response to Moranage, to all Black freedom: decimation.
That's right.
So the National Guard comes in with Vietnam surplus, which my dad would have handled, right?
Right.
When he was there as a Black officer who wouldn't get fragged because he was a Black officer. So frag is when you pull the pin from the grenade and you throw it back to the white officer corps, not towards the Vietnamese in the front, mostly if you're Black soldiers.
Right.
So it is a war within New York, within a captive zone known as a prison. And so they treat any desire for freedom as a declaration of war against the state. And what has happened after that, I would argue, are less spectacular cycles of the captive maternal, from being captive to caretaking for our communities, to stabilize them and have them, quote, calm down, to people saying, enough, we've got to protest this. Protest is not enough. We need to make a move, do a movement. We need to create an enclosure. We need to make demands. And the state, COINTELPRO, Attica, the state treats us the way it treats rebellions in so-called third world or the global south.
Absolutely.
You conform or you face decimation and death. And the death doesn't always have to be about the body. It could be about the intellect and the spirit, but the mandate from the state is control or death. And so earlier on Black Power Media, when I'm listening to Hiram and Chad and others, they're pointing us always to the political prisoners, the prisoners of war. Because even though it's been decades and people might think this is our past, no, this is our future. It's really important to make interventions now in order to shape the trajectory of what our future will be. And that is on top of the fact that they sacrifice and whatever dignity and homes they desire and that they should have, they have to be constructed by us. Like my biological family was not going to be safe. This biological democracy is not safe. So we reinvent family. And like I said before, in the 1800s, some master, mistress thought it was a good idea to sell your 5-year-old twins. Well, after you process, which is probably going to take more than a minute, we still adopted other children, other families, other elders. We still reconstituted family because the state has always attacked the integrity of Black family as a zone of autonomy. So we do that with our political brethren and sistren as family. And that's what I've tried to do over the last couple decades with the anthologies. It's never enough, but I understand the politics of revolutionary struggle to some degree, and I understand the emotional need of intimacy to keep stitching ourselves together with connectors. I don't know if that made sense.
It made a whole lot of sense, and I had 32 questions. 32 questions, and I would like to say definitely, I appreciate you touching on all that. Shout out to Jihad and Hiram. I don't know if you heard us because he just fainted, but Hiram's from Connecticut, like me, so we'll give him a little bit of credit today. But definitely, you mentioned Attica, and for the viewers who are not familiar, the Attica Rebellion took place 3 weeks after the assassination of Field Marshal George Jackson. And it was a direct response and a wake-up call for our brothers on the East Coast. And we will be talking more about Attica as we move forward. But it was definitely, when you talk about rebellions, it's definitely very important. Rebellion and, the prison movement itself is absolutely necessary. So definitely shout out to all the workers out there. Just like I said, on behalf of when we talk about the environment, political prisoners has to be at the forefront, because they are our freedom fighters, and they are your comrades. And any one of us can become a political prisoner at any time. You know what I'm saying? So we should always make sure that if we're talking about anything like reparations, that political prisoners are at the foundation. Yeah.
And I think, to go back to the Black Power Media discussion on this platform, a lot of our politics have been like repurposed into some kind of like, I want to be capitalist too, but Black one.
Right.
But yeah, reparations for the politically hunted, for political prisoners, for the imprisoned, of one writ large, because it's a torture zone. But again, I'm being repetitive because I'm echoing, the brilliance from this other collective conversation. The threat to the state is shaped in part by not just our physical autonomy, but our autonomy in terms of the way we think. If we believe, even if we can't figure out what is the alternative to an imperial democracy based on white supremacy, genocide, slavery, if we say we don't have the complete answer for this, it's like what Jihad said, I don't have the answers for everything, but there are answers out there. The one thing we can agree is this has to go. And so for the political people, they have the ethics, they have the emotional intelligence, they have the will, and they sacrifice. Once they agree that their political theory is materialized in their spirit, I call it agape. Like, because I'm also a former seminarian, I go to church, agape is considered to be the highest form of love. And in part because it's shaped by political will, because you don't love everybody. People don't love you all the time, right? Or sufficiently. Right. But you can will yourself to stay with people and to stay with justice and stay with liberation. I mean, it doesn't feel good. There's not necessarily reciprocity. And that's why the sacrifices are uneven. The people who get captured took the risk, but the risks are based on their ideas, and their ideas were based on love, not personal love, not, you need to love me back, not fraternal, sisterly, familial, partner love, amorous, erotic. It's like, okay, all good, but that's not what we're talking about here. You're talking about the political will to love through terror. Because the state has already told you over centuries, we will terrorize you.
Absolutely.
And so the ideas have to stay intact. And I'm starting to think that's what we have to preserve. Like, we're going to transition anyway. It would be nice to transition being nominally free and not in a cage. It's better than nice. I'm being facetious, right? Well, we're going to transition and we're going to leave a legacy. And the legacy has to be, while we're trying our best to protect and to get out political prisoners, and there are new ones who keep coming in. So it's not like, the elders are out. I mean, there's another wave, right?
That's right.
Because the state is a hunter. We have to preserve the word or the words, because I just think it's like a Tower of Babel now. Because nonprofits invested in Black radicalism, opportunists invested, academics invested. So the meaning of revolutionary struggle, if you have 40 people, it has 40 different meanings.
That's right.
And I'm not trying to say that this is monotheistic, like there's only one meaning or something like that, but there is a legacy. And, George, the only reason we're having this conversation because it's Black August and because you said you want to talk, right? And I sent you the photo of Mrs. Georgia B. Jackson, right? The mother of both of those both of those extraordinary beings. But we would have to preserve the legacy and the meaning. And I think that's a fight in itself. On the
Absolutely.
surface, it looks like it's easy. Oh, it's just words and ideas, and then you're like, no, no, this is intellectual guerrilla warfare.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a hard pill to swallow, intellectual guerrilla warfare.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not as easy as, it rolled off your tongue, you know, but folks don't want to deal with that particular part of it because you know, guerrilla warfare, has been separated. We want to place things in different compartments and say, okay, well, I'm just an intellectual, or I'm just that, or I'm just the. No, this is, as Dr. Carruthers pointed out, when you're dealing with intellectual warfare, it is a necessary component. This is the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. It's not either or. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. I agree. And it's the training that you all were talking about all month. Like sometimes it was fasting, meditation, training, what kind of foods we eat. And, I wasn't able to do it all. I
No,
get tired and sloppy.
hey, you
But
got started.
I got started. I was listening. I was trying,
It's all
Um,
good.
See, I work in a sector where we're supposed to be intellectuals. And on a good day, yeah, that happens. On a regular day, like we're commodities or we're a factory that produces commodities.
Right.
So we can produce something and we could put this stamp on it that says like guerrilla intellectual. And that's not hard, because
Right.
it's branding. It becomes difficult. It becomes difficult when you connect the ideas to the material struggle, even if you're not on the front lines. And make it clear, I'm not. I never said I was. It's a big thing. So, like, I have T-shirts. I don't wear them. They got people on them, right? I would like to think of myself as somebody's ally, not necessarily, their relative, because I can't make that claim, even if I've met them because I've gone different places, right? I think to be a guerrilla intellectual is a willingness to go back to the isolation you were talking about, Kalonji, in childhood. It's the willingness. I wouldn't call it quite about. I don't know if the word abandoned is quite the word for it, but to be isolated, right, and to be ostracized,
Right.
because then you actually have a function. If you function captive material, not stage one, not stage two, somewhere around 3, 4, 5. If you're doing guerrilla intellectualism, which you all do on your podcast, you become a threat. If you do it and you have a linkage to the academy, which is an industry, then you become a threat that's also going to be a problem. And so the best way to deal you out, I mean, nobody wants to do it old school COINTELPRO because it's just messy. It's a bad look, and that's supposed to not to happen anymore. We evolved. But the best way to deal you out would either be to ignore you, or not either, but ignore you and then gradually just siphon off like we used to siphon. I never did it, but used to siphon gas like in the old days, right?
You find
Just
out you had a
just a little
straw and some more
sip, right?
gas.
Yeah, you just a little, and then you like just transport it over to something else. You
Yeah.
siphon it off, and you manage the flow so that it doesn't get too radical. And then over years, you just dilute it. And I could give you an example. Like when I was a full profit Brown, I mean, I had to go because like, I was having a nervous breakdown. I don't care who knows anymore. Largely because when I did this conference, I was asked to like a prototype for Crit Resist. And then I did an anthology, and then I got the publisher to send, 50 copies inside. And I knew a close relation who was in the party. And they gave me a list of names, and Jalil was on it,
Hmm.
Mutakim, right? And then
Right.
Jalil got the book and he sent it back. He didn't send it back, but he wrote a letter and he's like, yeah, this is nice, but it has nothing to do with political imprisonment and long-term incarcerated people. He didn't add tortured, but tortured people. So this was an academic conference, right, on abolition. And it was like one of the first. It was going to launch the big wave. It was 98. So when I left Colorado and I went to Brown, this is what I mean about I listen to people. I can't always automatically respond. But within a year or two, I responded to Jalil. And he's the reason why I did 4 anthologies, I think it's 3 or 4, on political prisoners.
Mm.
But inviting formerly incarcerated, like veterans, Sofia Bukhari and others,
Yes.
Puerto Rican independentistas, right? Inviting them to campus 20 years ago was like, quote, an outrage
Can
for
imagine.
for a Black Studies department, right?
At Brown.
So yeah,
Wow.
but 20 years
Right.
later,
Right.
it's totally,
It's
oh no,
fashionable.
we're gonna,
Right.
yeah, we're gonna edit their books or put their books out. We like, I mean, and it's good. Brown bought Mumia's papers.
Right.
That's great. But I know I got called into the president's office. I call it the principal's office, right? Just trying to put a little conference together that ended up being imprisoned intellectuals. So that's what I mean, that you siphon and it gets diluted, and then the meaning of it transitions. It's not quite the same as get people out. And yes, if you have Mumia's papers, I'm betting, hoping, Joanna Fernandez was instrumental in that, and so always been solid ally of Mumia, hoping the university itself is going to do more to amplify what's going on with his health needs, but also decades of incarceration and this trial, that's in air quotes, right?
Yeah.
That denies his rights. So this, I mean, I can shorten this by saying the warrior is always fascinating for consumers who are not warriors.
That's right.
And risk takers who love so much that they sacrifice their lives for freedom movements, they are also fascinating.
No doubt.
But a lot of these industries want another kind of capture. We've got your story, we've got your papers, and now we can study you. And
That's
so
right.
that becomes the antidote to the guerrilla intellectual.
You mentioned, and I'm glad that you mentioned the whole Brown and Mumia situation. We actually have Johanna Fernandez, Julia,
Right?
Julia Wright,
Mhm.
and someone else on I Mix What I Like will be on there for a special joint on this Monday coming, having this discussion. So for folks who are asking about that, tune in Monday at 8 a.m. and we're going to have this discussion. So
Yeah, and they're all great people, and they'll have a lot to
absolutely.
say. I'm just
Absolutely.
talking about my former employment sector.
Oh yeah, no doubt, and that's a beautiful thing. In fact, yeah, shout out to Johanna. She actually was responsible for the 2 interviews I did with Mumia on Riot Started TV. So, definitely, salute to her and others. And we'll get a better understanding, of course, of what's going on. I want to because you mentioned George, and you also mentioned his mother, his beautiful mother. Is a picture of her. I couldn't get it, couldn't enlarge it, but this is her, and of course George on the side of her, and she was a seriously strong human, let alone woman. I
Mhm.
mean, to have both of your sons stripped away from you within a 1 year time, you're talking about a year and 3 weeks. Excuse me, a year and 2 weeks. She
The
lost both
7th
of her
to the
sons.
21st, yeah.
Yes, 7 to 21st. You're talking about a year and 2 weeks. It's just like, and she was still strong, and she was still speaking out, and she knew, she understood, because she learned from George as well. She didn't come from a radical tradition or a radical background, but George's politicizing and political education
Mm.
took things to a whole nother level. You wrote a piece that some folks are familiar with, and that's part of the reason why we brought you on. And I want to note that when it comes to Black August, I am very select about who I bring on to talk about George Jackson, Jonathan Jackson, or Black August as a whole. Usually, they're founders of the Black August Organizing Committee, and I'm real serious about that because I don't even talk to folks on the East Coast, have them on about talking about Black August because of the fact that I like to get to the meat of things. I like to get to folks who are serious about this work. Not to say that anyone else isn't, but I like to get as close to the source as possible. But this piece you wrote, George Jackson, Dragon Philosopher and Revolutionary Abolitionist. First, I want to know, like, what was your first introduction to George Jackson? Because, coming from, uh, in your words, a family, a father who was an intelligence officer, to having love and admiration for someone like George Jackson, who was imprisoned at age 18 years old, who was, for all practical purposes, much like Malcolm X or Malcolm Shabazz, a social prisoner or social pariah who transformed himself to a political prisoner. How did that take place? What was your introduction, and what inspired you to dig deeper?
So my introduction was visual. It wasn't literary. I was visiting in the home of a prominent abolitionist, and I walked down the hall, and there was this 6-foot poster of a shackled Black man with confidence. So it was like these dichotomies. It's like, wait, you're shackled and your head's not down. You don't look like just this sort of wry smile. I mean, it wasn't bravado. It was confidence. Like, even if you're walking into hell, it's like, I'm gonna meet the devil. It's like, I got this, right?
Yeah.
What this means, of course, was going to be devastation, but I don't even have the words for it. It just struck me because I was used to a lot of fear. Yeah, maybe that's it. I was used to a lot of fear. Like, I grew up with guns, I shot them, I knew all that. But there's a lot of like, people who work in certain sectors and do violence for a living. They're always like, "Yeah, I got this," but they're also like nervous. I mean, their nerves are shot. I mean, let's just be honest. You kill people for a living, your nerves are shot.
No doubt.
So I'm walking down the hall, and then there's this confidence, and the setting is, this is not the state. This is a revolutionary zone, right? And I had to reconcile because I'd never seen anything like this. And actually, my whole upbringing, and from teen to when I finally got out of Texas, it's a reactionary state. So everything is, if you want to talk about stuff, and I did meet Panthers and stuff, but it's like most of a whisper. It's like a ghost, whatever. And this was bold. And so I just stood in the hallway, and I was like, well, who is this? Right. And then I began to learn, but it was the visual. It was the visual. It was like a three-dimensional personality imprinted in a poster, and that nobody was talking about. Nobody said, oh, this person is this. It's just like, I'm going to have to find out who this is. And then from there again, so the person who introduced me into abolition, of course, was Davis, right? So I had a postdoc, but I knew them from organizing before because they'd organized with Women for Racial and Economic Equality, which was a communist women's organization in New York City. So, I met different people. I connected with different people. So my academic trajectory always followed my politics. It didn't really follow like me being a book scholar, because I'm not, right? So doing the abolition, George just started to come in through the door, learning more about abolitionism, even though abolitionists weren't really talking about George because he was too scary, or it wasn't, quote, a good fit. Because in some ways, based on the funding, or these large Research One universities that were hosting these abolitionist conferences for the first decade, they were very prominent, they're very wealthy, they're kind of the bearer of the state or the corporation imprint of high intellectualism. George wasn't going to have a place, right? But George kept popping up. And so I started teaching George at Brown.
Hmm.
Now, like, people who took my class 15, 20 years ago are like, they're writing books on George. There's something going on right now where these 20-something-year-olds, 30-something-year-olds, it's like George Jackson. And again, I'm puzzled. They're not my generation. I don't fully understand. I only know that when I first taught him, especially to white students, and I was co-teaching an article by Frank Wilderson on the Black Slave is Not a Worker. I can't remember the title. My entire privileged white wealthy student small seminar, they all went on a strike and they didn't speak for like 2 hours to punish me because I, quote, "made them read George and Wilderson at the same time." And I was like, "Okay, whatever, we'll just see how this plays out, right?" But again, I wanna bring my concerns back on the table. I'm not sure I trust this interest in George, like this, like, expanding interest in George.
Right.
It's like the sister, right? Like, we're her daughters that I'm just like, "Well, which daughter is that? Is it the daughter doing the sickle cell anemia testing or the daughter in the underground?" 'Cause,
Right.
as academics, we're not taking those risks, to have that kind of lineage to revolutionary struggle. So you're talking about care work, right? And so if George is suddenly really like the person to read among, the black bourgeoisie or petty bourgeois, youth who are left, and I'm not chastising, I don't know him, so I'm still a little wary if they're introduced to George or the expressions about George are going to be funneled through the academy. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. There's always a watering down process in order to accept blackness. So yeah, I
But
agree with
it's not just blackness, right? It's black rebellion, which is not the same thing as blackness because
you.
they're
Right, and that's what I mean. I'm sorry. I'm
yeah.
talking revolution, and I say blackness.
Oh, okay,
I'm
you're
sorry.
trying
Go
to
ahead.
do a small circle here.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
also, Kit Kim Holder, the concept of the dragon philosopher for that article that appeared in the Black Perspectives blog, like I guess in 2020, that came from Holder, a conversation with Holder, who was talking about the dragon.
Right,
And again, my degree is in political philosophy. So I was like, my dissertation is on Hannah Arendt. I didn't learn anything about Black people from school. I'll just put it that way.
right,
And nothing about rebellion, right? From, Jesuits or conservatives or Ivies. But when Holder says the dragon philosopher, I'm like, wait, like what kind of philosopher is that? And if the understanding is the guerrilla intellectual is not just the strategist of how you have security or what people call a people's war or how you destabilize empire, they're also philosophers. There's meta thinking. They think across all categories. This is what it wasn't just the visual of George. When I read George, I see love. And then I have to reconcile, right? Like because of all the militarism, all the like you do this one, then you do this one, and then like there's going to be dying on both sides. And then there's this immense love, right? That coexists. So everything that you're told about dichotomies, that there can't be violence and love in the same space, you realize is just like a disciplinary track because it doesn't reflect the reality of our existence, right? The love is profound and the violence is deep. And then you have to reconcile the two. And so, because if you split the two, it doesn't make sense.
right,
And that's why I was on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. I said, George is a captive maternal. And the response was like, nah, he's a hyper masculinist. How could he be a captive maternal? And I was like, because he loved and he cared for people.
right.
I think we have to talk about love in a less abstract way. I'm not saying, or I will just talk about myself. I have to talk about love in a less abstract way as I attempt to get closer to revolutionary struggle. And
Right.
also, I try to distinguish force from violence. You're allowed to use force against violence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's important. And I was just getting to that, Emma, as Che Guevara said, revolution is an act of love, right?
Mhm.
And I don't for myself, if I can place myself in a position of thinking about freedom fighting, it's all about love. I don't understand revolution without love. Revolution without love is criminal. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because it's the love for your people and it's love for humanity that you fight. It's the love for the planet that you fight, that you resist. So people are confused and misconstrued and they say, well, why are you so angry? I'm not angry, I'm in love. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? And because of that love, it causes me to respond to violence, by whatever means to put that fire out. You know what I'm saying? I don't usually say by any means necessary because folks attribute that to Malcolm, but of course that was white folks who came up with that initially. But I agree. We have to respond accordingly. Um, you talked about the dragon. You talk about dragon philosophers. And we say Black Power resistance, and we respond, "Long live the dragon." Give us your understanding of the dragon. When you say the dragon,
Mhm.
what does the dragon mean to you?
I mean, you're doing therapy online here.
It's cool. I got you.
Yeah, but I'm not paying you, so I
That's all
like
right. I'll send you the bill.
you see me bill because I feel if I pay for it, I can control it a little bit. But if it's free,
Yeah.
then I have to
That's
really
right.
answer
Start a
a question.
TV.
Yeah, no.
You Dr. George James, but this is my house today.
This is your house, so now okay. I'm like, but I'm checking the time. I'm like 45 minutes, right?
Yeah.
That's the standard. Wow, that one. The dragon is a mutation. You like the way we're all born with personalities, and some of us have strong personalities. I did not have a strong personality. I mean, I had a strong will, but not a strong personality. So I was a stutterer. I hugged trees, I hid in trees, I stayed away from people. Yeah. But the dragon, there probably times when the dragon was just waiting for me at the corner, kind of like the trickster, like, right? Like a legua. Like
It's true.
they meet you at the crossroads,
Man.
and they've just been sitting there, like, we've been sitting here for 20 years. But like now you're here, so now we're gonna do this, and you can run away after, but like once we touch you, you're gonna remember that there is a dragon. There's a dragon inside of you, there's a dragon inside the people, there's a dragon inside the children who are born and who make it to long lives, and the ones whose lives are shortened or who never make it out. And there's dragons in women who are forced to carry, right, a penalty of being charged of homicides. And so then they will be reduced to captives. I mean, the dragons are everywhere. Just George seemed to have collected quite an amount of their energy and their intensity. And that collection, that makes sense. The years in solitary confinement, the violence, the murder of W.L. Nolan, who I think probably loved George and George loved him. There's all kinds of loves, right? Again, the brotherly, the sisterly, the emotional, the erotic. I think our dragons are born out of love and despair. And when you mix that, you don't necessarily get passivity. You probably at times get agency. And I, of course, never met George. I bumped into George, in a home of people who knew George. But when you bump into George, you brush up against the dragon. And that is the capacity to think and act outside of conventional politics and social decorum, because the conditions of struggle are determined by the violence arrayed against the people you love. And when you read George, he's always talking about the people he loves. And also, in some ways he's a seer. He knows himself as dragon, that he will likely not make it out alive.
That's right.
Because he's not going to conform. He's not going to be less than a mutation. I think the ways in which we're broken is that people harm us and then we pretend that there is no dragon available to express our resistance to that harm and continuous predatory acts against us. Those are the broken people. But they've refused, the energy of the fight. And for me too, dragons are not anti-intellectual, they're highly intellectual. Of course, we're talking about mythological beings, right?
Right.
But there's their capacity, right? Their capacity is increased because they appreciate emotional intelligence. Like you said, if you don't love and you're engaged in certain acts, then you're just doing crime. And it's eventually or essentially crime against the people, crime
Right.
against nature, crime against your own nature. So the dragons are feared unless they can be like tamed and turned into circus creatures.
That's right.
But I wouldn't keep a dragon chained up because like they always manage to get out.
Right.
And then there also seems to be, as a seminarian, I skew towards the New Testament, but the Old Testament keeps cropping up. I wouldn't call it revenge, but there does seem to be reconciliation, not always in a good way, of a harm doer with the person harmed. And it doesn't always have to be physical. It could be, verbal, it could be intellectual, spiritual. But I believe there are Orisha and ancestors for a reason. And sometimes the only way you have peace is accountability.
Right.
And accountability can't be, delivered through a check or your first Black president, your first Black female vice president, or your first Black
Symbolism.
woman.
Right.
So I mean, that's a payoff, and
Right.
it's cheap. It's pennies on the dollar. So long live the dragon, as you said. But like you said also before, either we got on or during this, most people cross the street when they just have an inkling that there may be, dragon trace, like, accompanying you into a movement or into a classroom or into, your manager's office.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's what you spoke on, that is that reciprocity is that act of love. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we have to, yeah. And what is that? Again, like on my old training in seminary, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Okay,
Right.
totally agree. Because I don't want to keep a list that long and then have to like go through check. I mean, that determines your life, right? Like payback. But
Right.
I don't think that's what George was doing.
Right.
It
Right.
was like freedom is ours. And then anybody who insists that they will continue to torture, to rape, to murder us
They'll get
has
burnt.
got to go.
Yeah.
And that is what a war is. What is it like in Coup, Boots Riley's Coup, like that song Guillotine,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
where the sister, she passed too soon, right? She's dressed up as Dorothy with the red shoes. And we got the guillotine. And the refrain that she keeps singing that stays with me is, "We were in a war before we fought one."
That's right.
And that's true. I mean, we were like, wait, is this really what this is really this?
Yeah.
And then it takes a while to process. And then it's like we have to do something like what I was calling those stages. But we never off the bat went straight for somebody.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, people came for us.
Right. And that's the thing. They fear the dragon because the dragon is a reminder of what must be done. And it is, you can hide it, put it away, put it in a dungeon. Don't bring the dragon out unless he's going to fight for us.
But it's that, and when you're saying it's something else too, dragon is the reminder of memory. Because whatever the white supremacists are saying and doing about their need to whatever and their victimization, they know it's BS. I mean, unless they're so dumbed down, they can't figure out, north from south.
That's right.
People know how violent this democracy has been. They know it's genocidal. When the dragon shows up, it's not like it just materialized out of thin air. It materialized out of the trauma and the terror of genocide.
That's
That's
right.
what creates a dragon. So it's a reminder of the deeds of the state and the empire. And that's why the dragons have to be obliterated. It is not just to negate Black freedom or Indigenous freedom, it's to negate the memory of the genocidal logic of the conquistadors, right? And for us, I'm not sure we want to remember either because we want to, quote, get on with our lives, like as if under these conditions, that's going to
Right.
be, quote, easy to do without abandoning impoverished, poor, caged immigrant folks. And then
Right.
we become an extension of the state with blood on our hands.
Right. And that's the thing. The dragon doesn't want reform. The dragon wants revolution. Yes, long live the dragon. Definitely, I appreciate you laying it out so eloquently. You make the dragon seem like a very responsible.
Oh, it's like the dragons are having a PTA meeting, right? It's like,
Yes,
no,
so good. The dragon,
no.
we go talking about we're gonna go burn things down. Yeah, it's cool.
Or
Past that.
the Kalonji, but it's also build things up. I mean, look at George's legacy, right? And look and go back to the mother.
Right.
The mother became a dragon after they murdered her
Without a
sons.
doubt. Without a doubt.
Like,
She
go
was
listen
born.
to her. Y'all don't have to listen to me. Go listen to her clips.
That's right.
And even with the younger one, because when I was talking about Jonathan, I was like, well, technically he's still a child and children can be kept in there. And she's like, she corrected me, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
50 years,
Mm-hmm.
later,
Mm-hmm.
after, I said stuff that maybe did make sense. She's like, Jonathan was a man. And then I
And
had
a
to
child. Yeah.
process that because I wanted to protect him in the category of child.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, no. She's like, Angela didn't tell him what to do. He was a grown man.
That's right.
And then I realized, oh, that's not, dragons are ageless.
That's right.
You could get a 7-year-old who's a dragon and they'll be
Spirit.
labeled neuroatypical. We got to put them on meds and all this other shit. Like maybe it's just a free child and nobody wants a free child any more than they want free Black people.
That's right.
And so I think we misrecognize dragons. I think we fear them. And it's complicated. Like we want freedom, but we want freedom without dragons. And I'm like, I don't know if that's I know that's not a real thing.
It's
And
definitely not
so
gonna
it's not going to happen. But then is it, do we really want freedom if the
happen. Right.
dragons are going to be involved?
Right. And that's the thing when we talk about, I have a problem oftentimes with the slogan Black Power, even though we have Black Power media here, because it's like what Malcolm talked about when he talked about revolution. He said if you knew what a revolution was,
Yeah.
you get out the alley. You know what I'm saying? You break out, you bounce because of the fact that you don't really want revolution. You want freedom, but as Fred Douglass would talk about, you want and I'm paraphrasing the storms, the thunderstorms without the rain without the thunderstorms. You know what I'm saying? You just want everything to be smooth going, and we can all get along on our Rodney King, and everything's going to be peace. But it's not going to happen like that because, as I say, capitalism is a very violent system. It's a very violent system, and it requires bloodshed. And they talk about dragon's blood. They want the blood of the dragon. You understand what I'm saying? But they don't want what it takes to deal with the dragon. And the dragon understands clearly what it takes to deal with the captors and to break those chains.
But I think so. What do you think about the possibility that we have to re-engineer the way we manifest as dragons? To the extent that some of us want to or willing to, some of us are not planning to, but I will tell you that seeing people who were macheted or blown up, and there's, I mean, that's a visual that, I mean, I'm looking at this in my 20s. I remember it decades later. There are experiences which will facilitate mutation. I'll just put it that
Right.
way.
Right.
So, is there a way though to present dragon so that people can at least link to the intellectualism, even if they can't deal with the material struggle?
Absolutely. That's why you're here.
Oh, is that my job? I thought this was therapy.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
with therapy, since you wasn't paying for the therapy, I had to, you had to work it off. But
okay.
no, I think that I agree with you. I think that the thing is, you know, the dragon is simple but complex, because you can't box the dragon, you can't cage the dragon. You understand what I'm saying? The dragon is not a zoo animal. The dragon
Right.
is not a pet. You can't rub the dragon's head and back and say
Yeah,
it's
it'll
going to be
bite
all
you.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
You understand? So it's creativity is the key. We have to use creative resistance. I'm not saying that um, because in our minds, again, this is a physical, mental, and spiritual war. You know what I'm saying? It's not one or the other. And so many people. I was on a platform last night, and one of the things that one of the folks commented and said was, we got to leave it in the hand of the ancestors. And I told her, I said, listen, man, we should be embarrassed to say, and I'm all for the ancestors, don't get it twisted, but if you're going to work me to death while I'm here, and then when I'm gone, you're going to still be calling on me, and you don't have
Mm,
the wherewithal to do anything for yourself, then you deserve what you get. You deserve to lose.
yeah,
So yeah, I think you have to be creative.
yeah, I'll respect to, their ideas and comments, but yeah, I imagine the ancestors are like, the grandma, grandpa, like I'm raising 3 generations here under this one woman. Like I thought I'd already raised, like,
Right.
y'all need to figure this out. And also we need new crops of ancestors.
Absolutely.
However they form. I, j- I, j- I mean, I guess I'm asking you, yeah, 'cause I want to ask you questions. I'm asking you,
Hold on. How we get to
oh, no, that's okay. Free therapy works both ways.
okay.
Okay. Our people suffered, as we know, structured predatory violence for centuries. So on one level, we're just like, we just want out, right? And this is like Toni Morrison's, right? Song of
Right.
Solomon,
Right.
right? The flying African, like I'm out, I'm going, right? And I personally, when I read that, I'm not sure he made it back to the continent,
Right.
but hopefully, right? So how do you deal with the emotional exhaustion and the fear of the state? That's 2 ingredients, right? And the third would be, I wouldn't call it this indifference about co-optation, but this sense of futility that we can't get people to stop co-opting the legacy of Black revolutionary struggles in the plural, right? And like I've said before, like if so and so, like if they got 22 million left, people should just say we need 1 million because we want to buy a building, or we want, like we should just like tithe, like in church or whatever you do in mosque or whatever your religious background is. We want a percentage that goes. I think we should just start asking for money. Not me personally, because I got my day job, but it seems to me that we're hesitant about ourselves. Like some of us are revolutionary. It's going to be a small percentage. Some of us are anti-revolutionary, a larger percentage, and some of us are counter-revolutionary, which means we work for the state.
Right.
So we all have a comprehension about revolutionary struggle, and we all know that dragons exist. How do you see us stitching closer bonds or ties so that the rebels don't get kicked to the curb and abandoned and are allowed to do their thing, even if they're just a smaller percentage of the whole?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that it reminds me again of Che and the guerrillas when they're outnumbered and they have to have food. They have the support of the people themselves, right? It reminds me of the Cuban Revolution, and it reminds me of so many different pieces. There's always going to be a small number, but I guess the question you're asking is, how do we insulate ourselves, right? Or is it more along the lines of how do you deal with the fear, or because
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. It's like a smoothie, right? There's a lot in the
yeah,
blend.
I was trying to catch you on the first couple, then you added like five more.
Why not? Um, I'm just struck by our fear and our masking.
Okay.
That's what is, I mean, I'm reaching a stage where I'm just like, I don't care anymore. Not about the people. I mean, but again, I told you I had a lot of fear, so I masked a lot. And
Right.
people say to this day that I'm not really clear when I'm speaking, maybe because I'm putting in too many words, or they're suggesting that I'm masking. Like I won't just clearly say, do A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3, or X, Y, and Z. But
Right.
I think it's really complicated. I think we're really complicated.
Yeah, but fear is intelligent. I mean, I fear a person that has no fear. You know what I'm saying? Because, again, I mean, you have to have a degree of fear, and you have to just turn it into some type of motivation. You have to turn it into adrenaline. You have to make it work. You have to turn it into fuel to keep you moving. For me, yes, it gets exhausting. Yes, as an organizing for 37 years plus. Yes, it is stressful. Yes, there's pain. There's always going to be rocks thrown. There's always going to be shade and attempts to discredit and destroy, because I don't move to the beat of those who are comfortable, right? So I recognize that the state's comfort is due to our discomfort, right? We're always going to be uncomfortable if the state is comfortable, right? But I look at my ancestors. This is where the ancestors kick in. I look at folks like Harriet Tubman, and I say, wow, I live in Georgia, right? So I often see the dirt roads, or I might go to Mississippi, or I might go to Alabama. So I see the trees. See, many of us have never they've never been on a dirt road. Me coming from a concrete jungle, from the inner city, from the projects, a dirt road is like hell to me. You understand what I'm saying? Because I know what took place on these dirt roads. Again, I mentioned in the beginning of the broadcast that I was in Richmond a couple of days ago, right where Gabriel Prosser was hanged. Mm-hmm. So I look at folks like Harriet, and so when I get tired, I think to myself, I say, man, imagine if she decided that she wasn't going to take that walk, or that if she decided she wasn't going to go through the swamp in the dark. I'm talking about those dark roads because there were no lights and there was no paved roads. So many times you had to go through swamp, and you had to go through, there's snakes and there's alligators and there's all types of, aside from the enslavers, So to me, knowing that I'm only here, and we're all here, in most cases, less than 100 years. This is such a short amount of time. I feel that it's our duty to contribute to our future. I'm a grandfather.
Congrats.
Yes, I'm a grandfather. So I want to be able to make the road a little bit easier so they can, you know what I mean? So they can keep it going, and we're not just looked at as political footballs and being tossed around for the next 100, 200, 300 years, worrying about what white folks are going to do. You know what I mean? So I think it's, for me, I can't speak for everyone else. That's my drive. That's my motivation. It's like, look, they were brave enough to fight And aside from that, just from my immediate family, my great-great-grandfather was a man named Sam Pace. And it was told, family history, that some U.S. Marshals came onto their land in Florida and attempted to kidnap his brother Aaron. And somehow 7 U.S. Marshals was dropped that day. And my great-great-grandfather, Sam Pace, was accused of such. So I always said, if my great-great-grandfather was that brave during that time and that turmoil, I can at least make an effort to inspire, make an effort to politicize and carry the torch. So that's what I hope I didn't sound like I was all over the place, because you did give me a big smoothie.
No, but no, that's really helpful, because when you were speaking, I was thinking, oh, I get it. It's lineage over generations, over centuries, right? For you, it's Harriet Tubman. For me, it's Ida B. Wells.
I know,
But we're descendants of dragons.
without a doubt.
That they're in our family trees. That's our lineage. Like, you trace your family back, that there's going to be somebody who did something that wasn't pragmatic, right?
That's right.
But they did something that was necessary.
It's that spirit, and that's what
That
the dragon
spirit.
is. It's a spirit ultimately, and that's why when you said the dragon can be 7 years old and it be ageless, is because
Mhm.
that spirit existed with time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It has always been here. It's like energy. It was never, it can't be created, it can't be destroyed. You know what I mean? It just changed forms. And this is where we are today. We're changing those forms. And by any means and whatever means, we're going to do it. And I am convinced in my soul, beyond what anyone thinks, what anyone feels, who likes what I says, who agrees with my philosophies and all that, that's irrelevant to me. You know what I'm saying? Because once you know who you are, it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks about you, because they move and live the same way we do. You know what I'm saying? You're colonized like I am. You know what I'm
But
saying?
now
You're a special slave.
I understand better now what Mrs. Jackson said after you just said what you said. Jonathan understood who he was.
Absolutely.
Even as a teenager, he had comprehension and awareness, and he was dragon too. And so maybe that's a I mean, for whatever reasons, it's comforting. It would be distressing if we were moving blindly
Of course.
and erratically. But whatever looks like blindness or looks like it's erratic from afar, if you get close enough, you can see there's comprehension. George understood what he was doing. Jonathan understood what he was doing. And the connector was the dragon, was the breath of the dragon. Like, we all inhale, we all exhale. Like, sometimes to calm our nerves, and sometimes what we're inhaling is the fire,
That's right.
and we're exhaling the fire. And
Right.
that's what it should be.
Right. And the dragon is often misunderstood. Like you just said, like you said, you talked about, Georgia Jackson, whose name is not often brought to the forefront. Here's this woman is who lost her 2 children, her 2 sons, her boys, because she was a mother. So they were her boys, although they were men, right? But you talked about how you begin to understand, it became clearer because she was already clear. That light switch came on. You know what I'm saying? George helped to bring that light. And like you said, she transformed into the dragon, the mother of dragons. And she was misunderstood for quite a while. And it might take some time to just totally grasp and fully understand, because some folks will write her off as just like, oh man, she's not thinking properly because of these loss. She's grieving, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But she
It's
was clear.
yeah, I mean, it's almost like, with the mothers, and there have been movements, right, in which the mothers have been prominent after police killings of their children. But the focus sometimes becomes overwhelmingly, or only overwhelming. I don't know, that doesn't mean anything right now, but solely about victimization. And you forget their agency. I mean, Mamie Till Mobley is another ancestor I think of, because an open casket funeral for a mutilated 14-year-old is a declaration of war against the state. You
That's right.
just violated every decorum. Even the funeral director, who's Black, was like, let me put some things together.
Right.
She said, no, he did something, but she opened the casket, the cameras, it's like, yeah, I want you to see what we're dealing with,
That's right.
right? And that is a dragon move. I don't want to do dragon all the time, but I don't care. It's comforting now, because I guess what's not been working for me have been the conditions under which I'm supposed to perform as a responsible, quote, human
Right.
in an inhumane setting. So what does it mean to be human in an inhumane setting when Black people are not even considered to be fully human, at all? I mean, there has to be another connector, another source of energy and comprehension that does not come from within the walls of the state or this educational system, right? And when I think of Mrs. Jackson, some of the stories that are a little bit, when I've listened to her recordings, not just to George, but when she talks about, remember we talked about crossing the street, like people
Right.
cross the street so they have to be next to rebels or allies of rebels. She talks about other Black parents crossing the street after her sons were killed because they didn't, like she was, quote, the bad mother
That's
because
right.
she had rebels for
Right.
children.
Right.
And to accept that she had rebels for children, free children, the dragon children, right? Men. That took years. And she also juxtaposes in one short clip George and John in relationship to their father. And she says something like, they killed their father, years ago, and he's physically alive.
That's right. That's right.
Her,
That's a
her,
cold statement.
yeah,
Right.
and
Right.
the sons are deceased or materially, physically not, but they're alive. So it's like, what is death and what is life in this relationship? She reconfigures. The father is dead, the sons live, right? Because they live in memory, they live based on their passion, their dedication, their risk-taking love. And that is why, kind of as we move to, I'm taking charge as we move to a close. That is why I think I can walk into somebody's home, look down a long hall, see a 6-foot poster, and then just be drawn to keep walking till I'm inches away
That's right.
to figure out, what is this manifesting that I'm witnessing? And that probably happens to us all the time in different ways, right? Mumia, Leonard Peltier, Sundi Aramoto. I mean, the names we know and the names we don't know and the
Right.
names to come means that we will always reproduce the ancestors, and the ancestors will always have an intimate bond with the dragons.
Right.
And so we never die out.
That's right. That's right. You were walking into the light when you saw the poster of George, and you kept moving closer and closer and closer, and that's exactly what it was. Yeah. I mean, wow. I mean, on so many levels. You know, whew, felt like Revolutionary Church today, Dr. Joy James.
Well, you're a deacon, so
So I'm the
that
deacon.
you're
All
the
right.
deacon. Yeah.
The deacon.
Mm,
Deacon for the weekend. Listen, definitely appreciate you coming on. I want to ask you, I want to pose one more question at least
mhm.
before you exit. And that was something we talked about around the question of gender, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because we're in a new era, and it seems to be uh, a lot of sidetracking of the slave. It seems to be a lot of reasons for us to be pitted against each other, much like it was on a plantation. I'm this, you that. I'm not down with this. I'm not down with that. Meanwhile, this system morphs itself into whatever it needs to be to conquer us all. So I need to, in your opinion and your thoughts, what's your thoughts on this gender divide right now, and what can we do to sew it together in your words.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we stitch or suture in a way that it won't fray, and we'll have to stitch and suture again. But I agree from what I've been seeing afar, and also people have told me I'm not on social media, so I don't know what goes on Twitter, Facebook. But
You are blessed. Go
oh,
ahead.
I could. This one blessing. I'll take that one. Um, but people are saying that sometimes my work is used against feminists, right? And I'm not trying to leverage anything against feminists or feminisms. That's also in the plural, like abolitionisms in the plural, because they're different types. I am trying not to be boxed in by bourgeois, petty bourgeois thinking. And you could, those could be buzzwords too, but figure it out. So we've suffered quite a bit of harm over centuries, and whether or not you believe in epigenetics, we still have health outcomes that are pretty devastating, whether it's giving birth, surviving surgery, being diagnosed correctly, et cetera, et cetera. I would add to that our mental health needs are significant. And at times, I think the market can play on that with promissory notes. That if you follow a certain kind of Black feminism, you're going to be stronger, more vibrant, and safer, da da da. If you follow a certain kind of Black masculinism, you're going to redeem yourself and have your dignity and your manhood back, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And like in the middle or somewhere in between, because people haven't parsed it out, there's non-gender, there's agender, diverse gender, trans, LGBTQ plus. I would, for me, the things that I'm thinking of now are filicide, which is the murder of children, femicide, the murder of women, and genocide, the murder of communities and culture. And that does not exclude men, because there are boys or children who do not present as female. There are trans women who should be covered under femicide, and I'm not saying they're men. I'm just saying that all of these categories are no longer stable. So as we emphasize the gender divide at the same time that the youth are dismantling gender, that seems to be an odd turn in itself. And sometimes it feels like it's a deflection from the predatory state. I feel that under fascism, gender is not going to be a big deal, because if you're designated for genocide, your gender is not going to determine if you go first or last, right? And it reminds me when Davis wrote I don't know the full title, I'm going to mess it up, but the role of the Black woman in the community of slaves. And Angela Davis says that it was a feminist track and they weren't quite aware of it at the time. And I accept that. It's their work, they interpret it. But what I note historically is they wrote that in their jail cell 3 weeks after, or a couple of weeks after George was assassinated. And it's a dedication that Black women are in community. They're not individuals to become vice president or CEO or Keechin Sewell, like the new first Black woman commissioner of the NYPD, which why would you even want that job, right? Or Lori White Lightfoot, the first Black lesbian mayor of Chicago. I mean, so what? These are
Empty
these
symbolism. Right.
operatives. Yeah, they're operative. It's past similar. They're operatives for the state. So
Right.
it's the community of slaves. What is the role of women? What is the role of men? What is the role of children? What is the role of trans? What is the people? What is the role of no gender? It is the community. That is what I would focus on. It is the community and captivity. Gender does not perform in a captive community the same way it does in a white community or bourgeois community. The divisions that play out there don't coincide with mass murder, right? or mass enslavement or mass rape. We have a specific corral or corridor within which we're forced to operate. There is no stable construct of gender under genocide. They don't ask if you're a boy or a girl, a man or woman, before they push you off a cliff or they gas you or they, drop a drone strike on you. You're simply something to be eradicated. Under those conditions, gender mutates. So we would have to follow those mutations and figure out a precarity. Should we stop violence against each other? Absolutely. And for me, like as a, why not? We're talking therapy. As a survivor of like several rapes, right? I would put rape on the list. Like, let's move that one up to like top 10 or something. But you understand too that men get raped. And so to understand the violence against women, men raping women, right? Men raping men and boys in carceral or in neighborhoods. Women and girls can also violate. I know, teenage girls that became madams and pimps, which for me was really odd because I only envisioned like a male persona.
Right.
It's the predatory violence that has to stop on all registers: emotional, intellectual, political, material, physical, sexual. And the gender mandates do not have the capacity to deal with violence on all those levels. They do some good things, like, yeah, there should be the reconstruction or restitution of what it means to have a male identity without being, perpetually shamed, to have one if you're cisgender. There should be like a reconstruction so that the female persona is not always seen as a victim. But this is what sticks in my mind sometimes. Or one persona who, I would use all my ROTC training to deal with, but they're deceased. Sam Little, he died from old age in prison, African American, after raping and murdering 93 women. How do you hit numbers like that? Disproportionately, they were Black. That's how you hit. Nobody, the state doesn't care. I don't know who everybody's talking to about like women's rights. That's if you're Black, the state doesn't care. Scalawag, Deshaun Harris just put out something in Scalawag on the war against Black women, right? And as LGBTQ member leader of the communities, and I learned from Deshaun, has a lot to say. We should be reading and studying, but understand our vulnerability is based on the legalism that is indifferent to us and the legalism that treats us as prey. So if there were these ways that we could be in communities, and I'm sure people are doing it already, but that we meet across genders and we talk about the harm inflicted. I'm not going to be, I'm like, my rapists weren't women. So, like, yeah, for me, men need to work. Males have a lot they need to work on in terms of what they've absorbed from this culture and the violence that rolls with it. But women and girls too, we need to, or women, right? We need, as long with adults, deal with the violence against children. So when I say filicide or misopedia, the hatred of children, which is probably more the hatred of their freedom, their ability to just like, I'm not going to do it, and you don't get to go off on them, right? So there's a vulnerability that we would have to put on the table. And this is the way I'm seeing it. I'm going to take a couple of minutes before I like sign off on this one because I'm still trying to piece it together, right? Because I'm still pissed. I know too many traumatized people. We're pissed. Like certain stuff your body just remembers forever, right? But one of the things, right? This goes back to fear. If we fear each other too much, there is no liberation movement that we can develop with integrity. we would have to trust each other, not just on wishful fantasy thinking, but because we became disciplined, we did the work. If we need the therapeutic intervention, give us the therapeutic intervention. We need the material conditions to have stable households, food for the kids, shelter. Like, okay, bougies like me, write bigger checks, put that on the table. But a gender war is a deflection from genocide. Genocide takes both genders. Now, have a gender battle. I don't have a problem if you're moving towards resolution and rapprochement. The way I see it just says only a segment of Black people will be open to the dragon or receptive to the dragon and their contributions. Only a percentage of us are going to willingly stop the gender wars, right? And you work with the percentages that are available. But the basics are you can't abuse children, women, or men. You can't abuse. You can defend yourself, but you cannot abuse. Not emotionally, not verbally, not physically, not sexually. Whatever your pain is, whatever your miswiring is, whatever your rage is, figure out a way to deal with it without inflicting harm. Everybody has the right to force to deal with you. And so back to Samuel Little, there was an older Black woman. He would attack women in his car. He would choose women who were homeless or who were drug addicted or self-medicated or whose IQ was below 70 or 60. And there's an older Black woman who traveled with him who probably had mental health issues as well. But his attacks and strangulations would happen in the backseat of this one car. And she would dutifully go out with Clorox and bleach and clean up the back seat, right? Of all what comes out of the body when it's dying or deceased. And she also a couple of times defended him in court as a elder church lady who would say, oh, no, he'd never do that. He never, okay, here's the point. The women who were murdered, you almost hit 100 count. Nobody thought they should live. And so we have to reverse that whole concept that nobody gets to live, that nobody's worthy of it because they're addicted or they're street working or they're sex worker or because, they can barely say their names or, what, I don't care anymore, right? I believe, and this seems like we're pulled in different directions. I believe that at the same time we develop a security apparatus, we have to ratchet down the violence.
Yeah.
We have to be incredibly disciplined. And that's what dragons are. They don't burn down the entire freaking town. It's strategic. And part of the strategy is that we have to discipline ourselves. And children come first. The most vulnerable come first. And that would include, right, men who are incarcerated, who are unhoused, just like it includes women in these same sectors. I don't know, maybe my therapy session is probably over, but I mean, this is what's lingering with me. I can no longer romanticize that some dragon is going to appear and save me as much as my respect for what George and Jonathan believed in their commitment to freedom. Jonathan was trying to free people. So was George. Well, there are things we can do in everyday living to lessen the aggression. And that would be a way to cultivate a dragon that doesn't have to do harm unless it is actually a war.
Right on, right on. Listen, Dr. Joy James, this therapy session, powerful joint. We got people in the chat talking about a part 2, and I agree with that. I think we need a regular therapy session at least once a month, or bi-monthly, something. You know what I mean? To make sure that we get this thing proper. Definitely appreciate you coming on and rapping with me today. It was man, I'm gonna do something I don't usually do. I'm gonna actually go back and watch my own show.
I'm gonna go watch Georgia Jackson.
Hey, definitely check out Georgia Jackson because she is the true mother of dragons. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us and helping to close out Black August. I know we got one more day left in Black August, during Black August, and I think it was an excellent way to end it. We will be talking about the Attica Rebellion in a few weeks. Hopefully, I can bribe you for another therapy session sometime real soon, and we run it from there. But I appreciate all that you do and all that you've done for us. Stay on the right side of the barricades, which we know you will, and we'll talk to you soon. For folks that are checking us out, also when I leave here, will actually be on Uhuru Africa TV. That's Africa with a K, Uhuru Africa TV. That will be in the next 6 minutes, believe it or not. They'll be broadcasting from Spain, and we'll be talking about 36 year commemoration of the Black Panther Party in Spain, and also hip hop's influence on the revolutionaries, the Africans who are in Spain doing the work that they do. Thank you so much, Dr. Joy James. I was about to do like Jesse and say, keep hope alive, but long live the dragon.
Long live the dragon. Stay well, Kalonji.
No doubt. You too. Peace.
Peace.
You're checking out Riot Started TV. We just had Dr. Joy James on, and I know you enjoyed it. So, when you get off, make sure that you share this and check out more of Dr. James' work. And also go check out Georgia Jackson because, again, she's someone that's that we don't hear much of. I know that Dr. James mentioned Mama Till, Emmett Till's mother, Mabel Till, and I wanted to point out, and I forgot to mention to her, that we appreciate her work that she's been doing with Samaria Rice, who is another one who they want to try to bury because she doesn't go along with the popular crowd, and she doesn't speak in the way they like her to speak, and she just say whatever she got to say when she got to say it, because she understands more than anyone else that she lost her 12-year-old son, and to her that means more to her than just conforming. So we appreciate you all coming on and joining Riot Started TV. Make sure you check us out again and again and again. We support Black Power Media, and we're gonna be out. Y'all be safe. Peace.